Overdrive. It's one of those effects that if you're an electric guitar player, you probably use on a daily basis. At least I do. It's one of my favorite things about being a guitar player, whether you're getting your overdrive from an amp or from a pedal or a series of pedals stacked together. It's one of the key parts of your sound, or at least it is for me. But like a lot of other aspects of guitar, this can be a concept that's a little confusing, especially for people that are starting out, or if you've been playing with overdrive for years. There's aspects of it that might be a little challenging to try and wrap your head around, or you might be a little unhappy with the overdrive sound that you're getting. So in today's video, I want to talk about that. But rather than just cover this topic myself, I figured I would reach out to a really good friend of mine and a man that knows a thing or two about great guitar tone and great playing, and that is the one and only Tim Pierce. Now, if you're not familiar with Tim, he has been one of the premier session guitar players in LA for 30 plus years, pushing 40 years now. He's played on thousands and thousands and thousands of records, hundreds of number ones, hundreds of hit records. He knows a thing or two about being a guitar player, and he knows a thing or two about great overdrive sounds. So let's jump in and hear what Tim has to say on how the pros use overdrive. But before we do that, a quick plug. I'm running a July 4th sale. You can get 30% off of my video courses and all of my digital products via the link down below. That's my Kemper profiles, my Helix presets, impulse responses, and both my video courses are 30% off for the next few days only. Check out the description for more information. I'll also have a link to Tim's Masterclass down there. He's been running his Masterclass for years, and there's over 1,000 hours of content and guitar lessons and things like that available. So if you're interested in learning more from Tim Pierce, which I would highly recommend, you can check out his masterclass down below. Without further ado, let's jump on a Zoom call and see what Tim has to say about overdrive sounds. Man, I've said it 1,000 times before, and I'll say it again. You truly are one of my favorite guitar players of all time.
Thank you so much. I love your playing too. You did a crazy good solo when you came over here that one day, and you did it in one take. So
what are you playing through right now? Give me your signal chain.
Yeah, so this is kind of designed for you. This is my 62-335 with Tyson tone pickups. The reason I got this guitar affordably was because it didn't have the original pickups, among other things. It also had a great refret, which Tom Bukovac would be happy about. I love refretted guitars. Okay, so this is plugged into all of my overdrive pedals, which are all off right now. Then I'm going into the Bassman, which I know you like too. And this old Bassman.
That's a pretty tasty signal chain, man. So the overdrive we were just hearing, that's coming from the amp then?
That's 100% amp. So now the thing about this is you could get a little more out of it, but it'll begin to fizz out and collapse a little bit. You can kind of hear it on the low notes. So I like to find the spot right before it does that, right where it's still holding. It's still holding in the bottom end. It's not getting loose and fizzy, but there's gain. And then I'm set up for pedals. That's the tone, that's basically the platform for me that makes adding the pedals really a great thing.
This brings up one of the first big lessons that I learned about using overdrive effectively, which is oftentimes you need less overdrive than you think you do. If you listen to records where there's a massive guitar sound, if you were to actually isolate the guitars themselves, more often than not, the guitars are not that dirty. Because you just talked about it with the Bassman there. Like if you start to really push it, there's more overdrive and more gain on tap, but it starts to fall apart and not do the thing you want it to do.
Or fall apart, exactly. Some of the best sounds that you think are huge and distorted are actually quite clean, your memory tends to make them sound different over time. Now, the perfect example of that is early Led Zeppelin. It's really the drums and then the bass on top of the drums and then Jimmy Page sitting on top of that with his incredibly skinny, clean sound. So that's really the epitome of it. But it's really true. Distorted tones are very attractive in the moment, but when you actually get away for a day and come back and listen, I've often gone, oh, I need to re-record that with a cleaner tone.
What do you typically go for? What do you like to hear? Whether you're using a pedal or you're using an amp, like that Bassman, for example. What is it about the way that amp is breaking up that you like so much?
All the amps I have up and running today, and I have 6 of them for you, are very different. And the Bassman is very different. I would say about the Bassman, it doesn't sound too polished. It really shows its age. It sounds gritty. You can tell in a track, though, it sounds legit. It sounds like old music. The distortion is actually not even that pleasing in some ways, so you have to really try and make sure you don't, turn the top end up too much of the presence, because you don't want to accentuate any of the harshness. You want to dial it just back from being harsh. It sounds old. It sounds ancient. Should we add some overdrives?
Let's add some overdrives, yeah.
Okay, so the ODR1, a lot of people know, is what I've depended on for a long time. There are some clones coming out, which we can talk about too. I have one of them hooked up here. So this pedal, if I turn it on, the goal is to get this sound, but an imaginary gained up version. So it doesn't lose the character. So the pedal actually pushes the front end. More than anything, it's pushing the front end with a more natural tone. So what I just heard there seemed a little trebly and a little toppy. So I'm dialing back the top, dialing back the drive, turning it down a little bit. This should be better. Yep, it is. If I go to the bass pickup. Now, I think, well, now I'm in the Black Crowes, basically. This is the sound I'm looking for. It's the Bassman, but the Bassman, lifted by this great natural pedal. So that's the ODR1. Now I have 4 other pedals hooked up. Right now I have a palette of 5 overdrives in front of me. I wish I had 10 because they're voices. They're just basically voices and you can combine them.
So that's what we would call like a transparent overdrive. It's become kind of a buzzword in the guitar community over the last decade or so, but I think it can be a little confusing for people, but transparent means that you're retaining the character of your signal chain, which in this case is that killer 335 and that Bassman, but you're just sort of augmenting what's there with the ODR1.
Absolutely, and I can give you an even better example of that. So if I turn off the ODR1 and I turn on my boost line driver, which is basically an MXR micro amp updated, it's even more what you're talking about, because all this pedal does, it has a switch and a knob. All it does, literally, like I said, is push the front end here. And this is even more a more prime example of what you're talking about. So if I turn it off, here we go. Bassman now, turn on the micro amp. It's literally the same tone, but gained up. However, the amp is at its maximum. I couldn't get more out of it. So the actual micro amp is really pushing it in a transparent way.
So why would you choose a pedal in front of an amp over an amp's overdrive? What made you make the shift?
Well, mostly as a professional who's recording, you have to move so fast that it's best to leave some elements the same as you work. That's the absolute truth. That's why engineers set up 2 mics in front of a cabinet and you sit there for 3 days and you never change them. You've been through that. And a lot of times when you're moving fast, it's easier just to step on a pedal than it is to switch an amp, because then you have different levels. Then the engineer has to go to the mic pre's and change things. Now there are other advantages. You can have a volume pedal after everything. You can have effects set up so that your overdrives are prior to delays and reverbs, so they don't kind of distort those in the way that we all kind of don't like. If you have a distorted amp, you can't put delay in front of it without it gacking out, or reverbs get really pixelated or whatever. So the pedals actually allow you to hit the effects really nicely. This is what was really important, say in the 90s, about using a real Marshall for distortion. You can really hear in the bottom end the difference. You can hear the power of a transformer, the bottom end on a Marshall going gang, 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 gang. You don't quite get that out of the pedals. So if I plug in, let me just dial up this Marshall right here. This is an old 100-watt plexi Marshall. It's a lot louder. You're going to hear some hiss. I'm going to turn down the mic breeze. Wow, that's good. Once again, this amp doesn't distort a lot. It's just like the Bassman. The difference between this amp and that one, the bottom end will not collapse on this. It will not splay out. The bottom end will hold tight, almost even if I turn it up all the way. I love that sound. So this is an old plexi Marshall. So it's got more punch on the bottom end, just like you were talking about. Thud. I call it punch, let's say.
Right.
Now, it'll still have that thud and bottom end when I apply the same two pedals to this as I did on the Bassman. So let's give it a try. ODR1. I mean, it's a subtle difference, but that's what you want.
So how does the difference in an overdrive sound like that, you know, the difference between that plexi and that Bassman, for example, how is it changing your approach in terms of playing? Because even now, like watching you, I can tell you're playing different. The Marshall, you're playing differently than the Bassman. So is that based off of what you're receiving from the amp, the type of overdrive?
Yes, it is. And we can all become accustomed to what we're using within minutes. Okay. So if I go back to the Bassman, I won't necessarily remember the virtues of the Marshall as I start playing. The Bassman conjures up a more retro, I can almost visualize Muscle Shoals or, you know, Keith Richards, or it would send me into a style of playing that really, you know, I could imagine myself sitting in front of a 410 Bassman in an old studio that smelled funky. But when I go to the Marshall, and we all have our favorites. That's the thing. The Marshall is, when I discovered the Marshall sound, I got my first 50 watt at age 19. But probably what you noticed is in the Marshall, I was home.
So what are some things that you've learned in your career when it comes to utilizing overdrive in a musical way that you would tell someone who's maybe gotten their first amp that can break up, or maybe they've gotten their first few overdrive pedals and they're not happy with the tones that they're getting? Maybe it's too muddy or it's too bright or too distorted. What are some things that you do to try and dial in a sound that you're happy with?
Okay, so if I'm using the bridge pickup, and that's a tricky one because it can quickly sound nasal to me. So what I'll do, if I'm playing a part in a song, I'll choose the bridge, and then I'll dial back the tone to about 8. And that's good. I like that. So if I want to thicken it up, I'm going to go over to, let's say, the Mostortion. Now, there are two clones to the Mostortion. You don't have to buy the expensive Mostortion. Here are two clones that are great, both of them. The Karma and the Dan Electro, and the Breakdown and the MTN10. So those are clones for the Mostortion. The Mostortion now almost compresses it a little bit. It makes it more distorted, which I think is too much. So I'm going to back this down. I just want a little more hair. So once again, we're back to talking about keeping the character of the sound. Here's the sound without the pedal. Here's the sound with the pedal. That's me turning the knob. See, I'm barely touching it. Now, I'm going to fire up the track. Let me turn it on. And then I just turned it off for that last little phrase. So I would say what you need to do is always pay attention to never overdoing it. Get the amp where it sounds the best and go, you know, I paid a lot for this amp, but it doesn't do everything. It just does one thing That's the thing you've got to make peace with. Any amp you're using generally has one particular place where it sounds the best. Make peace with it. And then take your pedals and don't push them too hard. Just a little bit. And it's best to find the sweet spot on a pedal too. You might find the place on the pedal where it sounds the best. It adds gain and it adds size, but not too harsh. Leave it there, and when you want more gain and size, click on another pedal.
What do you look for when finding two pedals that pair well together?
Well, generally, the pedals, like if you set one pedal for gain, the next pedal you set, you're going to want to just barely touch it. So if I turn on the ODR1 and I add the distortion, pretty saturated. Now, if I add one more, let's say the XTS Imperial Overdrive that I have here, I would say it just adds a little bit of butter to it. So you need to watch your gain. And I'm talking about, don't be afraid to even set the second and third pedal, the gain on one. Just so it either thickens it. Like when I just added the XTS, the word I have, it made it more buttery somehow. And if I turn it off, I lost mid-range and I lost some glue, some lubricant. Words fail me, but now I know players, and you may be one of these guys who actually keep it switching around and seeing which one sounds better in front of the other one. John Shanks is like that. He'll shout at me and go, "Oh, you got to put the thing after the thing after the thing," and I go, "Yeah, okay."
Tim, it's been great, man. Thanks as always, dude.
Thank you, man.
Once again, huge thanks to Tim Pierce for coming on today's video and sharing his wealth of knowledge with us. If you don't know or don't follow Tim, you absolutely should. His channel is linked down below, as well as his masterclass where you can sign up for a monthly trial and check out some of the stuff he's got going on over there. I would highly recommend it. Once again, you can get 30% off of everything in my store. That's my tone course, my Nashville number system course, Helix presets, Kemper profiles, all that stuff is 30% off for the next few days only via the discount code in the description box down below for July 4th. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe, click that bell icon, follow me on Instagram, and thank you guys so much for watching. And a quick update, I'm out of the sling, I'm moving around, and thankfully, I should be back to playing guitar within the next few days. So once again, thank you for all the kind words and the support that you guys have showed me over these past 3 weeks. I think we're going to be getting back to normal here before too long. I'm Rhett Shull. Thanks for watching, and remember, there is no plan B.